welcome to our talk about bringing some old IP over into Fortnite. I'm Caitlin Lomax. I am Managing and Technical Director at Intr Studio. Bit more about that later.
And I am Ivan Ertloff. I am the Production and Creative Director at Intr Studio, so basically the idea guy who actually has to work from time to time. And outside of that, I'm also executive producer at Playside for the Work for Hire business unit. So outside of this beautiful talk here, you can actually talk to me about Playside stuff. So our talking points, the agenda, in a quick overview. So we are explaining how we came into the position that we have the Legacy of Cthulhu IP at Intr, what Legacy of Cthulhu was, an extremely low budget game, and how we thought about what to do with this old IP and how to utilize Unreal Editor for Fortnite to test the waters for this IP. Then we will talk a little bit about the challenges to rebuild cosmic horror in a very lush and friendly environment, and what our goals are for the upcoming testing.
So this talk is mainly business stuff. It's not too technical, but there was a lot of technical challenges that influenced our business decisions here. So that's a lot of what this is going to go through today.
Let's talk about the original game. That was Robert D. Anderson and the Legacy of Cthulhu. It was also sold as... Shouldn't we have had a slide about the companies?
Yeah, we did. That was missing. There was a slide missing, so we're just going to tell you about the slide that was missing.
Yes.
Little bit of context on how this IP ended up in Australia. So our studio at Intr, we're based in Western Australia in a little town called Bunbury, 2 hours south. I moved over there in 2020 in the height of COVID to be close to my parents and ended up building a house and starting a studio because that seems like a great thing to do in the middle of COVID. And yeah, I'm there for a bit longer. In June last year, Ivan entered the company.
Yes, and I invested the company and also brought in my own game studio, Homegrown Games, which is a little bit older. It was founded 2005 in Austria, in the Austrian mountains. So like that's rural Austria, but I'm not sure how it compares to rural Western Australia. So it sounds similar, very different. And it was originally just specialized on very, very niche games, like small, tiny target audience, small budgets, pump something out with a unique storyline. However, because we had some unexpected successes, like our slide has reappeared. Excellent, thank you. Because we had some unexpected successes, we actually got some work for hire, and no one says no to good work for hire projects. So we worked on Painkiller. We made the European version of A-Train 9 for the super nerds in train simulations, great game. And the last bigger project before merging into Intr was doing the narration and quests for Medieval Dynasty. Yes, the merger.
As part of the merger, obviously, one of the IPs that came across was the Legacy of Cthulhu. And the reason why this was so special is because Intr's very, very good at making things really, really, really pretty on really, really, really low-end devices. We've been working with mainly VR, AR, mobile, and web since we started and before that. So we were like, let's make it pretty, kind of.
Yes. So, back to the game. It was basically, it was sold as Project Anderson, the Legacy of Cthulhu in most English-speaking markets, as Legacy of Cthulhu in some English-speaking markets, and as Robert D. Anderson und das Erbe Cthulhus in German markets. It was developed on a budget of 44,000 euro, excluding marketing and production of the DVDs, of course, which was nothing. Even with inflation adjusted, it was zero compared to what we have today. It was actually the average budget for a B-tier trailer that the publisher spent, that they gave us to build the entire game. And of those 44,000 euro, we spent 30,000 euro on live action cutscenes. There was a reasoning behind that. I will get to that later. And because commercial game engines were unaffordable at this budget, hands up, who has developed games in the early 2000s already? Yes.
Oh, I've been stoked. I did tell him there might not be that many in the crowd that would put their hand up.
Yeah, I was actually betting I would be the oldest in the crowd. Thank you, Jason. But the entry point for the European engine of choice for most medium to larger studios was Gamebryo, if someone still remembers that name. And the entry price for a non-commercial license was 70,000. I Googled it last night to be on the safe side. And around 350 to 500,000 euro for a single game license. So if you have a budget of 44K, you go to a store, you buy the first-person shooter creator for like 50 euro, and then you try to mod the thing to do the stuff you wanted to do. So our development strategy was basically, we knew that the game would not be pretty, we knew it would be technically inferior, so we focused on those items that we could do, and that was narration and atmosphere. So we went begging to European goth bands for free contributions to our soundtrack, we got that. We wrote together with the European pen and paper publisher of the Cthulhu role-playing game, the ideas for the storyline. So we focused on narration, story, and so on. And the gameplay parts were integrated into a whole thing of a playable book where you could flip the pages, you could listen to audiobook sequences, you could watch the real action cutscenes, and then play the game levels in between. And Caitlin has reminded me that the usage of visual novel is a little bit misleading because today visual novel is an own a genre that we had nothing to do with. So it was basically more an interactive book with playable chapters. So how did that play out? Let's start with the good. It shipped. It shipped. If you produce a game on that budget and it ships, then you have already won. So everything else is a bonus. It did not only ship, it actually got localized in 7 additional languages. The main publisher was Jowood, now THQ Nordic, or whatever Embracer calls it now. But they also had 2 other publishers coming, hey, we want to license that for our territories. And that was Russobit and Game Factory. Not the biggest ones, but still quite nice. The sales numbers were surprisingly high. And they made a few %,000% return on investment, which is not that hard if you have a development budget of 44,000 and throw a little bit marketing on top. Narration, story, and atmosphere were praised by almost all critics and most of the players. We had some ratings that were like really high, 8 out of 10 on Shooter Planet was a surprise. We also got the game recommendation of the month by GameStar, which was back then one of the biggest game magazines in Europe. And it generated a small but enthusiastic fan base, and they are still playing it. They are still modding it. They are trying to get it run on modern computers, which shouldn't be possible at all. And if you look at the tweet, how do you call it tweet in times of X? I still say tweet. That's actually from November last year. I had no idea about that, but Stuart Main has included in his book, in his upcoming book about the most remarkable or most interesting shooter, retro shooters, he included our game. And he's allegedly still playing it because I had a short conversation after that. Buggy and unfair, but so surreal, it's great. Yeah, that kind of nails it. So the bad, look at the screenshot. It was basically kit bashed with whatever assets were provided, very few bespoke items that we created, and it was running on a dark basic pro kernel feeding into an unstable DirectX 9 renderer. So if you were around that at this time and you still know what those terms mean, you can imagine how bad it was in terms of working with the engine. So we had a lot of low to mediocre ratings. So you had basically a distribution, so not terrible, but meh. And then a second smaller spike of superfans that are still around. And we also got a reputation to make playable B movies, which we embraced a few years later with Into the Dark, which was really successful, but that's not the story of this call. Unfortunately, Bethesda's Call of Cthulhu, for a long time the gold standard in Lovecraft gaming, was released around the same time, and people started comparing our 44K to the $5 million US project, and that didn't turn out well for us.
Jump to 2023 when Ivan brings it to Intr. We're assessing what we have there. It's not currently generating any revenue, but it still has a small but active fan base. We're trying to work out, like, what can we do with it? Can we remaster it? No, we can't, because it was done in that engine. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to be pretty high risk. How's some ways that we could even see if the audience is big enough to invest that amount of cash into it?
We also have an issue with the music that we begged for the first one from the bands, because most of the bands don't exist anymore, and even the labels that they were signed under don't exist anymore. So, yep, that's the next blocker.
We also looked into, like, do we just make a idle clicker match 3, like anything, just to revive this thing? But it just wouldn't be on brand to what the whole Lovecraft mythos is, and other people had tried it and it had failed.
That's actually, you already warned the audience that this is a little bit of a business talk, but yes, this is actually something that a lot of the publishers that I worked for did. They had an old IP in the books, they valued it with 5, 10, 15 millions, and at some point the accountants or the reviewers would come, and how do you even measure that value if it doesn't generate revenue? And the go-to solution was either a standalone add-on that was cheaply produced, shipped out, just to keep the value on the books, or they tried stuff like cheap mobile games quickly produced, which doesn't work with a brand like Legacy of Cthulhu, right?
No, not at all. So that is when we actually asked our team, what should we do with this IP?
Wait. Yes, I get it.
We wanted to get other people's input, because obviously Ivan's a bit attached to it. I'm still learning about it. And the team actually were familiar with the game. Weirdly, they're way too young, but that's fine. And then our senior artist, Danny, had a great idea. Give Cthulhu a hot butt. Ivan and I looked at each other and we were like, yo, that's not bad.
It's not the worst idea we had.
Do we go like cute Cthulhu? There's already cat Cthulhu. Do we like lean into that? Nope, we're going to make Cthulhu hot. That's what we're going to do. And that's what we did.
Which also leads to our project pillars. Shall I start? Yeah, okay. So we wanted, in a nutshell, we wanted to test the IP as a custom Fortnite map. So, which reduces a lot of the upfront development risk, because Fortnite, the Unreal editor for Fortnite comes with a lot of assets, devices, functionality straight out of the box. We are both familiar with Unreal Engine, so we were like, yep, that's a really good idea. But at the same time, we wanted to minimize the effort, because it's basically market research to value our IP, to figure out how it is.
We also wanted to take it seriously, but not too much. We didn't see many Fortnite players wanting to play like a long format, narrative-driven game, so we had to work out, how do we make this authentic but still fun? Let's prioritize the fun over authenticness. It was super lucky at the start of this year. We actually had 3 work placement students come and do a month for us. They were all well equipped in Unreal, and we were like, this is the perfect opportunity for them. There's not too much risk, and they'll get experience working on a proper project. Then we filled the gap with all our seniors and made sure that they were getting full mentorship. But what that also means, and what Intr loves to do, is we make everyone a tech artist. So they walked in there as 3D modelers, they walked out of there as tech artists. It was great. This is the team.
Shall I?
You go for it.
So we have the wonderful Caitlin Lomax standing next to me, in charge of production and cinematics. More about that soon. We have Danny Gabb as the senior artist, and she worked with the 3 university graduates that we got, Josh Anderson, Kaylin Anderson, twins, and for several weeks we thought it's actually one person pretending to be 2 persons, but no, we saw them once standing in front of us, both of them at the same time, so they exist. And Izzy, our concept artist. So I took care of like the basic design, game logic and audio, and we were joined in the finalizing stage by Mihai Nikola, who was, and that's a heartwarming story, it was my second employee at Homegrown Games. And he went, meanwhile, and had an amazing career. He's currently working on the Gothic remake as one of the lead 3D artists there and environment artists. And he was really excited just to jump in and work with us again. So, yeah. Okay. One of the questions that we want to answer, and this is taken from the template, unaltered, like the shape and size, because it was really fitting. We don't know how the future player space looks like. We know nothing about the potential audience. So if we release a Legacy of Cthulhu map on Fortnite, we assume right now, and we are testing this assumption, what does the player audience look like? And we have like the Fortnite players. How many of Fortnite players are actually not competitive but co-op multiplayer fans? We don't know. We will find out. How many players are interested to play it because they are horror fans? How many of those are Lovecraft fans? How many are just curious? And this small circle in the middle, that's what we expect are returning players from the original game, if we are lucky.
So obviously there's some challenges here going from a standalone game into UEFN. First one's art style. The first thing that we got told when we said we were going to do it in UEFN, everyone was like, be careful of the memory usage limit. And it's true, but with the right planning and the right style, you can do it, I don't want to say easily. It is still challenging, but with the right planning, it's absolutely doable. The other thing was the gameplay. One thing that we noticed while we were testing is your native Fortnite players, they really know just like to run to the center. It's like ingrained in their brain, even if they're not necessarily playing the Battle Royale thing. Whether Lovecraft fans love to walk around and find stuff. So then we had to try find this balance of how can we do this without having pop-ups on the screen every 2 seconds to tell people where to go, and changing the way that people play the actual map.
Yes, and we had to kick out a lot of the narration from the original game. So it's not like playing a novel, but we still do a little bit bits of pieces of narration that can be found in a temple by looking at a sign or something like that. Regarding the provided functionality, the original plan a few slides ago was like use everything out of the box, use the devices, volumes, great tools. With linked devices you can do a lot. However, we realized that's not going to achieve the results, so we actually went into verse and verse programming, which was a new world for both of us.
Defining the art style, like I said before, it all really comes down to planning. We did things as simple as, well, we didn't think it was going to be that simple. That was the thing. At first, we were creating more Lovecrafty rocks because we were like, oh, Fortnite rocks aren't just quite there yet. And then we realized, yo, we can just use decals on the rocks that are in there. And it worked perfectly. It saved us a bunch of time, saved us a bunch of memory. And that sort of thinking saved us a lot in a lot of different places. The next thing was, how do we make the creatures from the Lovecraft world look more Fortnite-ly? Like, we want them to be scary, but we also kind of want you to hug them and then just be eaten. So how do we achieve that look while keeping in the memory budget and making it feel smooth and connected as a whole? We went through and looked at all of the legacy art concepts and worked what checked what would and wouldn't work within Fortnite. What could we adapt? What couldn't we? And yeah, I think we actually achieved our goal of creating visually striking Lovecrafty creatures in the island.
Yes. We have the children of Dagon. Who is familiar with Lovecraft to the degree that they know what that is? Hands up. No one? Oh, two, three, excellent. So that's basically humans slowly turning into fish men because they are descendants of Dagon. So we have two states of transformation. The first one is like ghoulish zombified, but it still gives fish. And what you see here really well, like the stylization grade and the color selection works with Fortnite, and it still says fishman zombie.
And then this is the going fishing, going for good variant. And as you get closer and closer into Rylair, this is the more common enemy that gets spawned.
And now to our favorite enemy.
This is the cute Shoggoth. We leaned into the cute Shoggoth thing that goes around pop culture every now and then. It is adorable and you want to get close to it, and as soon as you do, it completely sucks you up and kills you, and then you live in the Shoggoth.
Not for long.
Not for long.
Also, whoever played Day of the Tentacle or Maniac Mansion, it's so close to the purple tentacle that you want to adopt it. Shall I go for Cthulhu? So, Cthulhu himself. So we went for the traditional original description from the Call of Cthulhu. So we created a lower body of a man. It's a stretch, but it is. Added the dragon wings, also like our senior 3D artist, and the team did that, not myself. And the tentacle face. What we did is definitely emphasizing the accentuated muscles of the lower human body, because otherwise we couldn't have
A hot butt.
correctly. And what we did to get a little bit more threatening vibe into this creation, because it is, after all, Cthulhu, we went a little bit more subtle on the saturation and on the color contrasts. If you compare it to the Shoggoth, it's very obvious. And we have a size of 30 meters in-game, which is really scary.
Then with the props, as you can see here, we have our own respawn points and our own rocks. We left this one rock in. We needed to find a way. I think we have something like 16 different custom items in there, which doesn't sound like much, but the way that they're set up, it feels like a lot more. There's a point there where there's almost no Fortnite assets except the walls and floor in there. And we were able to do that with some smart planning. I keep going back to the planning because it was the only way that it was possible.
So, yes. Weapons. Shall I go? Okay. So one of the signature weapon of the first game was the 6-shooter that Anderson carried into battle. It was the weapon that you had always at hands, no matter in which dimension you were. And people were asking us, and those familiar with the original game were like, it needs to be in the game. As Unreal Editor for Fortnite does not yet suppose an easy and reliable way to get custom weapons and their functionality in. There are some hacky ways, but not what we want to achieve. It will be in the game, but it will be hanging somewhere on a wall to be looked at. By the way, this weapon exists in reality, not in this nice color, but in those dimensions with that projectile basically taking a house apart when you shoot it. And then we had the...
We also have the futuristic acid gun. So acid is a common way to knock down Lovecraft creatures. This is the brainchild of our current team. However, we cannot use it in Fortnite yet. There are placeholder ones that we'll be using until they let us use it. We'll be at the round table asking them for it. Like the goo gun and the freeze gun, they're very similar, but they're not quite the same. Then we go back to pre-planning because it's my favorite topic. Like I said, we used a bunch of reusable modular type things. So with that very small base of objects, we were able to create such different environments within Rylair. everything's low poly, and we've put most of the effort into the textures, making them look really, really good. And we're only able to make them look really good by using trim sheets for pretty much everything, texture atlasing and channel packing the textures where we could as well.
Map and game design. As Caitlin had, that's by the way the shoggoth, how it really appears in the game. So it has this human skull pumping up and down when it moves, which is super cute in a disturbing way. So the map design was basically bringing together what Caitlin mentioned before, the typical Lovecraft investigator player who starts looking at every square meter of the floor, and the typical Fortnite player who rushes in, gun blazing, drops into the battle, and hopefully wins in the end the battle royale, which is like the opposite of gamers you can imagine. The approach is, of course, Rylech, the House of Cthulhu, is an island. We just added more islands, and we spaced them out in a way actually very aware of the memory limit, because the Unreal editor for Fortnite is really smart, and the engine is really smart with managing the memory if you don't overcrowd the places that are loaded at the same time. I mean, seems logical, but I had to learn that.
Yeah, this wasn't actually something we did plan. This was a trial and error, and then we did a lot of testing to work out how we could get that to run.
So basically all those islands are connected, and the players are driven via the player journey and the gameplay into the center. And in the center we have, after the players completed a few objectives, we have Rylech Rising, Cthulhu tearing it apart, and the end battle begins. So, so you basically start on the island, you are in a relatively safe spot unless another player kills you, they are totally allowed to. It is cooperative in the end because otherwise you have no chance. Up to the point where you start getting overrun by the creatures, you can fight each other if you want. Then you have clear visual signposts to go into the center, and then all the logic starts.
The other part to this was planning like how all of the cinematics trigger. So with the previous version, they used cutscenes, like real live action cutscenes, to keep the budget down. If we were to do that now, that would actually blow the budget like a lot. And now that the cinematics are so much more accessible, especially in Unreal and UEFN, that's what we're using now to replace all of those. Even though Ivan was a great actor in it.
Thank you, thank you.
We're going to do it in UEFN.
So I will not carry around that octopus on my head, which is very appreciated. Thank you. Yes, testing.
So there was a few different things in the testing that, as just normal game developers, we weren't quite prepared for. We'll go through them, but if anyone is interested in making maps for Fortnite, make sure you do your paperwork to actually do the publishing the maps before you're even ready, like before you start, essentially, because we didn't realize that you actually need that all approved before you can even test on any other consoles or Switch or anything like that. And that caught us, but we worked through it. That was all good. But yeah, just a pre-warning for anyone that is looking to do that.
Thank you. So the goals of the internal testing is basically just evaluating the pacing, which is one of the big question marks. Are the islands too far apart? Do we need fast travel? Do we need zip lines? You know, like connection points that are faster than swimming or running over sandbanks. How the player progress is perceived by both Fortnite players in our team and those familiar with the old game. Do players miss each other? Because as you might have guessed from the screenshot before from the editor, it's a huge map. There are points of interest, but if people run around for 5-6 minutes without even seeing a sign of another player, it gets boring. So we have to balance all that out. And then we have to test and balance the players versus players, players versus creatures, and of course, players versus Cthulhu. So, and we do not go public before we are safe that it's entertaining enough to achieve the results in the public testing.
You might be like, that's game design. Why is that part in a business thing? The thing is, if we put this out and it's not balanced even to any sort of like external testing type of thing, we've already lost the interest and we're not going to be able to work out where our target audience is because we don't have a game that's working.
That's, which would fail the entire test exercise of the game. So the goals of the public testing.
So obviously we want to see how much traction does the map gain. Can we get that natively, or are we going to have to ask for more marketing and PR money? What does that playing audience look like in terms of interest? Like, as you saw, we have an idea of what we think that looks like, but maybe it's completely different because we just don't know. It's such old IP. We get tagged every 6 months. It doesn't mean there's a huge player base. And ultimately, is there a business case for this IP at all, or shall we throw it in the bin? Because sometimes you have to do that, and that's fine too.
Yes, that's a sad but possible outcome of any such exercise. Also, I found out quite late into development about the Unreal editor for Fortnite analytics device that works out of the box and feeds your creator dashboard with interesting data about your players. So highly recommended. What's next? So basically what we see behind us is a small bit of what we are still building in the final stages. So we are now putting together the final bits and pieces of the non-Euclidic city of Rylech that has to rise from the water, burst apart, and have Cthulhu with his hot butt attacking the players. So that's basically the goal for, is it still May? Yes, it is still May. So for this and the next month, it's the goal to wrap that up, to get the map ready for a final internal test run where we go over answering all those questions. And if it feels too long, we put zip lines in. If it still feels too long, we give them a jet to fly from island to island. Slightly exaggerated, I wouldn't like jets, but you know what I mean. And then, end of July, beginning of August, we kick it out and we run our PR and communication exercises. So then we will observe, monitor, evaluate, get player feedback. I think player feedback is really important. And hotfix, because we expect when you expose the map public to a giant audience that people will find ways to speedrun it. I expect that someone will post a video, I killed Cthulhu within 3 minutes after landing on the map within 2 days of the release. And then we have to go in and iterate on that so that the rest of the test keeps valid.
The other part of that was, as Ivan said earlier, one of our pillars was let's use as much out-of-the-box stuff as possible to keep the budget down. But as we designed and molded the game, we realized that wasn't going to be possible, and there's so much custom verse in there now that it needs to be tested thoroughly. We can't just go, cool, ship it. It needs to be tested.
Yes, and after we have tested internally, externally, after we have looked at the data and probably had a few discussions and a few drinks while watching at the data, we have to make eventually at some point a decision if and how we move forward with the Legacy of Cthulhu.
Thank you for coming to our talk.